Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have a very special show. We have Neale Donald Walsch, and we're going to be talking about his book, God's Message to the World. You've got me all wrong is what God says. So we're going to be talking to, again, New York Times best-selling author of the Conversation with God series, Neale Donald Walsch, and we're going to be talking about your beliefs about God. Because your beliefs about God will lead you to behaviors, and those behaviors will then shape the world in which we live in today. And so we're going to actually be questioning some of the basic beliefs that we have about God and exploring how those beliefs actually affect the way we behave day in, day out. So welcome, Neale.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you.
So I want to ask you all sorts of questions about God throughout this whole program, like who is God? I've watched videos of you, and I think you're a pretty good depiction of God. You have white hair, a beard, you look wise. So is God a white man with a beard who judges us and asks us to obey and be perfect? And how do we worship God in the way that we'll get into heaven? So we're going to have a lot of questions about that later on in the program. But what I first wanted to do is look into some of the current events that are happening right now. So we have the Republicans and Democrats now facing tension with Obama. There's been racial tensions in Ferguson over the course of the last couple of months. And I think that this is connected to our beliefs about God, but I wanted to get your perspective too. Do you think those kinds of things, whether it's the conflict that we're having in our political system or even racial tension, is related to our beliefs about God?
Well, those are the least of the problems facing humanity right now. We just had an attack in Paris at a newspaper, at a magazine that killed 12 people.
Yes.
We just had 2,000 people killed in Nigeria, and we're having people beheaded and having it broadcast on television. So
yes.
you're mentioning of the
no. Actually, that was the next thing that I had on the list. I was going to ask you about the gunman who shot these people and said God is great. We have avenged the Prophet Muhammad. We have killed Charlie, so, and then the ISIS beheading. That was the next question, but it sounds like you want to start with that one first, so tell us about that. I mean, these are
well,
people...
it's all the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
We're talking about the dysfunction of the human race, and we're talking about what causes such extraordinary decisions to be made by presumably ordinary human beings, beings with strong beliefs for sure, but still members of the human race. However strong your belief is, what could cause a member of the human race to behave so radically, dysfunctionally, to be so destructive toward other human beings, to be so beyond cruel, but simply inhuman and inhumane toward other human beings, such as to kill them over a cartoon or to kill them over a set of beliefs that they hold that disagree with our own. What could sponsor inside of the human heart such a response, such an activity, such a choice, such a decision? And the answer is the beliefs that those individuals who perpetrate such behaviors hold. Their beliefs that, one, they're right in what they are assuming to be true, and their belief that they are, in large measure, their belief that they are supported by God, not just in their righteousness, but in their decision to kill and to harm and to maim and to be cruel toward others, that decision is right as well. And they largely base those beliefs, from my observation, on a notion that this is what God does, that God has been killing people or ordering others to be killed from the beginning of time. Indeed, in the Bible, which is one of the world's holy scriptures, if you read the Bible with a calculator at your side, you will discover that God has, that 2 million people have been killed at the hand or the command of God. And that's as found in the Bible narrative, to say nothing of the statements that are made in other scriptures of other religious traditions that seem to indicate, or can be interpreted as indicating, that we should be taking revenge and avenge the deity. So, as long as we think that it's okay for God to behave in that way, we will behave in that way as well, using God as our moral authority
Right.
with which to act that way. For instance, there's no question that our understandings about God, not just in this area, but in many, many political and economic areas, those understandings, which have been given to us by canon law and other ancient religious traditions, those understandings have found their way into our civil laws. Indeed, the civil laws of many countries are based on scriptural and religious teachings, practices, and writings. And that's not just true in some other countries, it's true in the United States as well. As an example, just to give you one example, gay marriage. We're told, and there are actually laws against gay marriage in this country, which is fascinating, because the laws against gay marriage are based on our thought and our understanding that gay marriage violates the will and the law of God. If we didn't have that thought, we would have no basis on which to create civil laws with regard to that. The death penalty, in Texas last year, over 550 people were put to death. And they were put to death as a means by which the state wants to indicate to people that deliberately killing other people is not okay. So in order to demonstrate that it's wrong to kill people, we kill people. And we say...
The irony.
We say, well, Neale, come on. It's God's law, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's called justice. It's called you get what you dish out. And so we think that that's God's law. And therefore, we act with impunity as we use the same energy that created the problem in our attempt to solve the problem. But we don't solve the problem. In fact, the states where the death penalty is used most often are the states where, ironically, there are more gun deaths than any other of the states and any other of the countries. So it's, in fact, working against us. As Einstein quite properly noticed, you can't solve any problem by using the same energy that created it. But why listen to Einstein? What did he know? So we have this fascinating experience on this planet where we are acting as children, really acting as immature children, and pretending that what we're doing is right because it's authorized, and it is modeled for us by God, at least the God as we understand God to be. So my point in writing this book is that what if our understandings about God are wrong? What if God is not, in fact, a being whose love can turn to wrath, a God who is vengeful, and a God who is going to, punish us cruelly and eternally? It doesn't matter, by the way, according to certain people's understanding of God, it doesn't matter how wonderful you are. You can be compassionate, you can be caring, you can be understanding, you can be patient, you can be forgiving, and you can be unconditionally loving. But it doesn't matter. If you belong to the wrong religion, none of those other things matter. You're going straight to hell, where you will languish for all eternity with untold cruelties being visited upon you, simply because you chose the wrong religion, having nothing whatsoever to do with your behaviors as a person on this earth. And we believe in a God. Millions of people, billions actually, of people believe in a God who says just that.
Right. It's not who you're being; it's what you're doing. What you're doing, what you what you believe in, what religion that you're following. Versus
it's not even
who
what you're doing. You can do whatever. You can do all kinds of nice things. It's what you believe. It's what you believe. So if you're not believing in the right and proper way, you're going straight to hell. It doesn't matter what you're doing and how kind of person you are. And none of that is important. But if you belong to the wrong religion, you're going straight to hell. We've killed people for this reason.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the people in Paris, it's because Muhammad should not be portrayed in that particular way. And, they are serving, I presume, what they believe is God's will in that particular act of violence, because they believe...
And they're protecting the honor of God as they understand it.
Right.
They have positioned God as a being in the universe whose honor needs to be protected, and they're going to teach us that we are not to insult the God of their understanding.
Right.
And it'd be one thing to raise an objection, but it's quite another thing to actually kill people in cold blood because of a cartoon. If that doesn't depict a warped expression of theology and spirituality, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
But it's been done for hundreds of years. You know, for 300 years, the Crusades, the Christian Crusades, launched by a person no less than the Pope, killed people. This went on for 300 years, running rampant through all the countries of Europe, from Italy to Spain and beyond. And if a person did not confess in Christ, right there on the spot, they were simply killed. So you know, there's been a long history of this on all sides of the religious spectrum.
So what do we do? I mean, Neale, you're saying that we're actually, like you said, we're infantile. We actually are an immature race, and in some ways it would beg that we actually do need some laws, because left to our own childlike behavior, who knows what we would do? I mean, if we didn't have laws that it's not okay to kill people, I'm not sure what we would do. I don't know.
It's not about laws. What we need to do is to change and to then apply our beliefs. Laws will follow our beliefs, as they do now.
Right, I understand your point.
So what we need to do is to change our beliefs, not to create or enforce more laws, but to radically and dramatically change our cultural story, our understanding of God, our understanding of life, our understanding of who we are in relationship to each other, and our most fundamental beliefs about all of that.
Okay, part of it is that we have to understand what those beliefs that have been inculcated into our culture are. So tell us some of the ones that, you know, and actually let's take a couple of the ones. And I want to actually point out, you know, I have nothing against Muslims. I'm just talking about killing in the name of God and questioning whether those behaviors are right or not. But, you know, in some of the beliefs that you have in your book about, you know, there being a good and an evil, which I presume is kind of the main reason why, you know, some of these terrorists killed these folks in Paris. So tell us a little bit about the beliefs of good and evil and killing on the behalf of God. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but what would you want to say, if you could talk to the terrorists, some of which are now no longer, what would you have wanted to say to them about God and what God wants them to know?
That they have probably sincerely, but nevertheless deeply misunderstood God and who and what God is, who and what divinity is. On the back of my book, I actually have a true and false quiz, and I invite people to take the true and false quiz. It just takes about a minute and a half to do by reading the back cover of the book. Here's an example for it. Are these statements true or false? God is to be feared, true or false? God demands obedience, true or false? God requires us to believe in God and to worship God in a certain and specific way, true or false? God is vengeful, and God's love can turn to wrath, true or false? God's forgiveness is required for us to get into heaven, true or false? God is on our side, true or false? God has a plan for us, true or false? God sometimes answers our prayers and sometimes does not, true or false? And God will reward or punish us on Judgment Day, true or false? Other statements as well. I haven't even read them all, but those statements make the outline of the book that I have written, which allows people to explore the possibility. Just think, is it possible that there's something we don't fully understand here about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything?
Okay, so let's talk about one of them. So I assume some of the terrorists, they believe that God honors self-sacrifice, long-suffering, and martyrdom, and that God will punish or reward us on Judgment Day. I presume that may be motivating, and I don't know what they're thinking, but let's presume that those may be some of the beliefs that motivate them. What would you want to say to them? Just pretend that these are the beliefs. If we talk to the terrorists, these are the things that they believe in. What would you ask them?
I would say the same things that I would say to the Crusaders during the 300 years of the Christian Crusades. Your understanding of God is mistaken. It's as simple as that.
But why is it mistaken? I've read in the, you know, my holy text, it's the Quran, that is what I'm supposed to sacrifice.
Or in the Bible, where it indicates that 2 million people have been killed at the hand of the command
Right. Well, why does it say that then, Neale, if that's not true?
Because it was written by human beings who likewise did not understand who and what God really is. And we have been loath to criticize or alter or change what people who wrote those scriptures hundreds, and in some cases thousands of years ago, have written.
Okay, but I'm going to just be a contrarian, but they're sacred texts. Why should we change them? They're not meant to be changed.
They were. That's right. They were not meant to be changed. They were simply written in error from the beginning. Why we should change them is because they don't work. They are demonstrably non-functional. The book of Deuteronomy, for instance, just to use one example, says that if a child is a profligate, that is, if he disobeys his parents and he's disrespectful to his parents, he turns into, like a lot of young kids in college, a drunkard or whatever, going through a phase, he's to be taken to the town gates and stoned to death. Words directly out of the Bible.
Right. Yeah.
If I read the entire book of Deuteronomy to you guys here on this program, it would just really make it very clear that these statements, while they were written perhaps as allegories,
right,
have been taken literally by people from time immemorial. So we're going to have to change our cultural story, even though we are loath to change it because we are told that they were written not to be changed. Well, of course, nobody writes something that says, by the way, change this at will.
Right.
If a person writes something, they don't want it to be changed. But the question is not whether they were written not to be changed. The question is, are they functional? Mm-hmm. Are the beliefs that we have found in these scriptures functional? Let me make something clear. I'm not suggesting for a minute that everything in the Bible, everything in the Bhagavad Gita, everything in the Book of Mormon, everything in the Quran, everything in our Holy Scriptures is wrong or inaccurate. That's not my position. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that there is a significant number of beliefs that we find in those dogmas and doctrines that may not be functional, that may be misunderstandings, and we need to have the bravery and the courage, the spiritual bravery, to take a look at some of those and ask ourselves a simple question, a fair question. Is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't understand here about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything?
I want to go back to, can I go back, just want to make sure I understand. What do you mean by functional? What does it mean to be functional?
I don't, when did I use the word functional?
You said you want to be looking at the things that are written in the Bible and make sure that they're still functional.
Oh, that they work.
Okay.
That
they apply to realistic or our existence right now.
That they work given what it is we say we're trying to do. Let me give you an example of functionality.
Okay. Sure.
Is driving 178 miles an hour functional? Right. Well, you know what? It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to win the Indianapolis 500 Speedway, you're actually going too slow.
Right.
But if you're trying to get to the supermarket safely and not kill somebody in a city street, it would not be functional.
Okay.
It's not a matter of what's right or wrong. It's a matter of whether it is functional, that is, whether it produces the outcomes that we intend for it to produce.
Okay, got it.
If we are trying to produce a world that lives in peace and harmony and understanding and joy, are our beliefs producing that? Demonstrably, they are not. On this day and age, as you and I are talking, in what we call an advanced civilization, we imagine humanity to be fairly evolved. But in a fairly evolved civilization, it is still true that on this day, as people are listening to me, 2.6 billion people do not have toilets. 1.7 billion do not even have electricity, while 5% of the human race holds 95% of the wealth and resources and thinks nothing of it. Now, no advanced civilization would allow such conditions to occur. Over 630 children die every hour on this planet. I said every hour. Over 630 children die of insufficient food. There is, while we throw away more scraps from the restaurants in New York City than would be needed to feed them for a week.
Yeah. Well, you're presuming that we all have a general understanding about, if we all agreed that the world is about peace, love, and understanding, then that would be, then you would look at those things and equality and fairness. You would look at actions like that, or the things that cause those, and say, yeah, that's not serving the goal of peace, love, understanding, fairness, and equity. But as you raise in your book, God's Message to the World, we don't have we haven't had a dialogue on what it means, what our goals are. How do we start that dialogue?
By instigating what Martin Luther instigated in 1517. In the year 1517, he put a single piece of paper on a church house door in Wittenberg, Germany, called 95 Theses. And that single piece of paper started the Reformation, which in turn produced the Renaissance. 300 years of alterations in our political, economic, social, and spiritual systems. And right now we can do the same thing. It's about, we can do it far more effectively because today we have the internet, which is the the Churchill store, if you please, of all of humanity.
Yeah.
All we have to do is
Sad.
tack up all we have to do is tack up on the internet a single document that suggests there might be another way to experience being human, and to invite humanity to look at the possibility that maybe we have something here that we don't fully understand.
How would we get started? I mean, how does we even want to start that process? I mean, I understand an internet site.
It's very simple. You just announce it. You just go ahead and raise the flag and see if anybody salutes. In fact, I've done so. I've created a global movement called the Evolution Revolution, and invited people on the 12th of March, because if it happens all over the world on the same day, something extraordinary can occur. So I've invited people, and thousands have already signed up to do this, to take a single piece of paper called 1,000 Words That Would Change the World, and to tack it up on all the church house doors and the doors of every temple, mosque, synagogue, and house of worship, as well as place under the windshield wipers of all the cars and all the shopping centers, and just make it, spread it out everywhere on the 12th of March in hard copy, that is an actual piece of paper, as well as to everybody on the internet, everybody on your email list, everybody in your address book, everybody on your Facebook page. Just send it to everybody all at once on the same day. We're calling it the Evolution Revolution. We're calling March 12th Awakening Day, and if people want to join that process, they can simply go to evolutionrevolution.net.
Oh, cool. Okay, so give me an example of some of the things, the equivalent of Martin Luther. Give me some examples of what the theses are that people are writing, or what you've written. I'm sure you've started. Give me a couple of things that are on the top of your list.
Well, the 1,000 words that would change the world come directly out of conversations with God.
Okay.
The 1,000 words include statements such as this one: "We are all one. All things are one thing. There's only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is." Statement number 2: "There's enough. It's not necessary to compete for, much less fight over, your resources. All you have to do is share." Statement number 3: "God talks to everyone all the time. The question is not to whom does God talk. The question is who listens." And many, many other statements such as that. For instance, there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's only what works and what does not work, given what it is you're trying to do. There's no such place as hell, and eternal damnation does not exist. Death does not exist. What you call death is merely a process of re-identification. You are the creator of your own reality, using 3 tools of creation: thought, word, and action. And one of the most important statements on this list: your life has nothing to do with you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it.
All right, so I'm reading these theses. I like them. I mean, I like some of the things. Unfortunately, I haven't read your Conversation with God series. I'm probably one of the only people on the planet that hasn't. But so I like your thesis. I believe in a lot of the things that you talk about. Now what? Like what? How do I go about? Because I can nail this on a church door, and I think the church would say, yeah, I believe some of these things. And then what? I mean, how does the social movement happen to actually take this evolution and really do make it into a revolution?
It's about something going viral. Again, I want to point out, if Martin Luther could do it with one piece of paper on one church house door, and he did, we can certainly do it with thousands of pieces of paper on thousands of church house doors and on hundreds of thousands of computer screens around the world. It's about consciousness raising.
Right.
Someone once said, there is all the armies in the world cannot stop an idea whose time has come.
Yeah.
So when an idea has time, when an idea emerges whose time has come, what happens is that it goes viral. That is, people begin to go, yes, this is true, and they begin to decide that they're going to do something in order to make it viable and visible in our everyday lives.
And is that what happened to you? I mean, because I know I've watched a couple of your videos and I've read the book, and you have these conversations with God. And I don't know if you still do this, but on one of the videos that I watch, you say that you wake up at 4:30 in the morning and you have a conversation with God. You sit there and you take notes with what God wants to tell you. Is that still your process? And how did that help create your book, God's Messages to the World?
It is still my process. I begin usually my writing at 4:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. That's precisely correct. And my writing process continues until around 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
It's by that device that I've written 29 books, and most of the books that I write these days, I write in 5 or 6 weeks.
Wow.
So the one of the most important books that I've produced in the past 3 years is a book called The Only Thing That Matters. Mm-hmm. And the opening paragraph of that book says, 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter. Mm-hmm. And the book goes on from there to talk about what does matter and how we can move into a life that demonstrates that. Mm. So I think the answer is, creating critical mass around the world. That is, enough people who agree that the way we're now conducting life on this planet simply is no longer working. Mm-hmm. And we're getting very close to that place right now. I mean, the human race is actually losing patience with itself.
What gives you faith that we are? I actually sometimes wonder, what gives you faith that we are moving closer to that place?
Because the numbers of people who are protesting what's going on, who are raising their voices, who are saying, wait a minute, no, excuse me, is growing larger every day. We see it, in fact, all over the Internet. Mm-hmm. We see it, in fact, in the books that are being published, and we see it in public pronouncements as well. And so we notice then that more and more people are emerging from all walks of life, not just world leaders, but people in the so-called rank and file of the human race as well. People everywhere are standing up and saying, wait a minute, now just wait a minute. This is unacceptable. This is not who we are. This is not it may be who we are right now, but it's certainly not who we choose to be.
Right.
And we're seeing more and more energy moving in that direction. I mean, something like 2 million people. What was the number that showed up in Paris the other day?
Yeah, I don't know, but a lot of people showed up. Thank goodness. I mean, I thought that was a beautiful testament to the power.
That's the answer
and the
to
beliefs.
Your question.
Yeah.
What gives me the idea that people are rallying to express a different point of view. Just that, the pictures we saw on the Internet of millions of people on the streets of Paris saying, no, excuse me, but no.
Yeah, or protesting in Ferguson, or protesting in New York City. I mean, I think that, or even the actors are having that movie release. I know that these are more kind of trivial things, but at the same time, I think that they demonstrate that we're sick of things. So I can see that. I mean, I still sometimes get discouraged because I want the pace to be faster, but I think that there are changes that are happening. There are changes afoot. So let me ask about your own personal changes, because you're writing this book. How has your life shifted? Of these beliefs, these 17 beliefs that you have down in the book. Which ones have impacted you the most?
All of them have impacted me earlier in my life. In the first 20 or 25 years of my life, they all impacted me because I believed them all, by and large.
Right.
But as the years have gone by, I've shaken them off. I've rejected them. I've just let go of most of these beliefs through the years. And then when I had my conversations with God experience, I was able to release and let go of all of them, separate myself from them, because I realized that not a single one of them was true. And it was very important for me to come to that awareness and to reach those conclusions. And that changed, of course, my whole life.
In what ways did it change your life?
Well, it altered the way I moved through life. It altered, how I behave as a human being, hour to hour, day to day, person to person, moment to moment.
And how would you describe how you used to act and how you act now?
Well, I used to be like God, vengeful, and my love could turn to wrath. To use one example, I mean, it was I was incredibly judgmental, and I was always right. I was enormously righteous. And everyone else was wrong, and believe me, I made people pay for it in certain emotional ways if they didn't acknowledge that I was right, if they dared to question me or challenge me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest that you do it right now because I still have vestiges of that left over. So be careful what you say to me.
I think I've poked at you a couple times today, and you've been quite kind. All right. But what would it look like today if if you think about, because all of us have vestiges because we're human, right? So we're going to have these normal human reactions to situations where we may want to be vengeful.
The opportunity for us is to change what we call our normal human reactions. That is, to build a new humanity, to create a new way of being human, so that people no longer can say, well, all of us have these normal human reactions. That's true, we do, but we don't have to forever. So the idea here behind the New Thought movement is that we actually change the profile of what it means to be human. So when we then say, let's say in 20 or 30 years, when we then say it's normal to be human, we find out that the better angels of our nature are what turn out to be normal to be human.
Okay, so how did you, I know that you've gone through a process and you've kind of broken down these beliefs one by one through your conversations with God. Would you suggest we do the same? I mean, how would another person do what you've done, walk through the same path?
First, I think they would ask themselves, is my life working? That is the way I'm experiencing life day to day, by and large, working for me? I hate to sound like Dr. Phil here, but how's it working for you?
Okay.
And if life is working for you, and you get then look at this next question: is how life is showing up for the largest number of people on the planet okay with you? That's the second question. Because the 5% of the world's people who own 95% of the world's wealth and resources would say that life is working for them.
Right.
But if you ask them, is how life is showing up for the largest number of people okay with you, hopefully at least a few of them would say, well, no, not really. It's not okay with me that 2.5 billion people do not have a bathroom. No, that's not okay with me.
Right.
And hopefully they would say that. So the second question is then, if the world as it is not okay with you, and if there's anything going on in your life on a consistent basis that is not okay with you, and that you could imagine yourself having a better experience here, now we have a place from which to talk. What do you think could change in your experience, and what do you think might change in our collective reality that could produce a different outcome? Those are discussions that we need to start having.
With God and with ourselves and with each other. That's what I presume you meant, right?
Precisely. It's exactly correct.
Yeah. And that's how you started. And I assume that, part of what you're doing, I see that you speak all over the world. Are those the kind of conversations, and I know that you're coming to the EastWest Bookstore on the 24th. Is that what you're hoping to happen through your lectures that you're doing throughout this year on your book?
Yes. I'm hoping to instigate, to ignite, to inspire a larger conversation among people.
Yeah.
A conversation, just as you said, with God, with themselves, and then with each other, toward the end that such consciousness raising can produce outcomes, even as they have in the past, by the way. There's no question that the civil rights movement resulted from the beginning conversations that people like Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., instigated. There's no question that a greater level of equality between men and women in the marketplace, it's not where it needs to be, but it's better than it was 25 years ago. No doubt about it. That started as a result of individual conversations that people like Gloria Steinem and others began to indicate and instigate around the world. There's no question that the fact that I think it's 26 states now, or 36, I've lost count, have now decided that in fact gay marriage is legal, all began because Harvey Milk and others like him sat down in places like San Francisco and began having conversations about people and conversations with people, saying, is this right? Does this feel good to you? If there was something we could change, what might we do about it? Now, it's the sad thing I want to notice is that 2 of those 3 people were assassinated. Harvey Milk and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were both killed for instigating such conversations. So far, Gloria Steinem has escaped the same fate, but I do notice that we tend to kill people among us who cause us to take a look at new ideas that we might even call revolutionary ideas. Do
you ever worry about that with yourself? Because you're this person, right?
No, it could very well happen. And you know what? First of all, I'm old enough that I don't care anymore.
Okay.
it's really fine. I'm 71. If they want to end my life
Okay.
there, I'll go back home. But on a more practical note, if anyone did that to me, in a sense, even in my dying breath, I would say thank you, because you would just increase the volume of my message tenfold, even as they did with the message of Martin Luther King Jr. and Harvey Milk. I mean, as soon as those gentlemen were assassinated, what they stood for was magnified all around the world. So if they thought that what they were going to do was get rid of the message by getting rid of the messenger, oh my goodness, how wrong they were.
That didn't work. That
Didn't work with Christ either.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your conversations with God, because I'm trying to visualize, like, when you are talking to God, because I have my own conversations with God. I'm just wondering, who are you? And as I understand in your book, God's message to the world is that, God is everything that's ever been created. So when you're talking to God, who is it that you're talking to?
Everything. The divine intelligence, the source of all wisdom, all clarity, all intelligence, the originator, the creator, the aspect of the all, which is that intelligent essence. I don't see God as a older man in a white beard sitting up on a throne someplace in a great big fancy room somewhere, but I do see God as an energy, a source of intelligence that is pretty clear about everything, really.
Right.
But it's the source of everything, and that places at our disposal certain energies and the instructions on how to use those energies that can produce differing outcomes if we so choose. So who I'm talking to really is that source. I'm just talking to what I call the source. And by the way, I see myself as part of that. That is, there's no separation between, in my reality, between me and that source. I am part of the source, even as a wave is part of the ocean. I'm not the ocean. I'm a wave in the ocean, but I certainly am one of the waves in the ocean that is divinity itself.
Right.
And apparently, if enough of us start making waves, we can change the course and direction of the ocean flow itself.
Right. So the thing that, it's funny because I've read a lot of spiritual books and in my radio show, and generally speaking, and I read God is one and we are all one. And somehow the chapter that you wrote somehow landed on me in a way that no other book has ever landed on me, which is, anything that I look at, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to God. When I'm talking to my husband, I'm talking to God. And you have this really beautiful passage in your book where you said, what if you actually did meet this supposed white-haired man in a beard, if that's how you visualize God? How would you treat God if you met God? And I thought, well, that's really powerful, because we are all God. So when you meet, when I'm ordering a coffee from Starbucks, or I see the dog running along the street, or I look at a plant, these are all manifestations of God. Therefore, they are God. And how would I treat that plant or animal or human being if I thought they were God? Because they are. And that was the thing. And I don't know if I completely screwed up your chapter, but at least that's what I took away from it. Is that what you meant?
Yes, it's precisely what I meant. And furthermore, it's the solution to all the world's human-made problems. It's not the solution, to weather and tornadoes and meteors hitting us from outer space, but it's certainly the solution to 90% of the problems that are, I want to say, man-made or human-made.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. If everyone simply treated everyone and everything as a manifestation of divinity and began doing that as of this very minute, 90% of the human-made problems would disappear from the face of the earth overnight.
Yeah. That was one of the most powerful.
For one thing, we would never allow people to die of starvation. It would simply be anathema to us. We would simply not permit it. We would say, wait a minute. We're not going to see 600-plus children die every hour on this planet for lack of food. It's unconscionable, it's unacceptable, it's obscene, and we're not going to allow it anymore as a civilization. Our opportunity right now is to civilize civilization.
That's beautiful. And I completely agree with it. It's hard to do, but I think the one that, when I read through the book, that was one of the most powerful passages that I read, because I thought, well, it really does. If you walked around thinking that person is God, you see a homeless person on the street and you say, well, that person's God, you wouldn't just walk by, right? Or you wouldn't or you wouldn't give money and hope that that person would go away, right? You would act in a completely different way if you thought that person was God.
Because I spent a year on the street. I was a street person for a year, so I've been on the other end of that.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side of that exact experience. Someone walked down the street once and saw a homeless person sitting on the sidewalk, with his back against the building with a little bottle of maybe 4 Roses or whatever, and just sitting there with a little hat, hoping people would drop in a few coins. And the person I was walking with said, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And I said, "No, actually, it's the other way around. There, because of the grace of God, you go." There you go, being a homeless person again. There you go. There you go.
Right.
There you go, being a mean person again. There you go, being a nice person again. There you go, being a generous person. There you go. There you go, being a male. There you go, being a female. There you go, being a dog again. There you go, being a tree again. There you go again. and so I was instructed by my spiritual teacher to say to everything I saw, walk down the street and look at everything and stop for 10 seconds and say to everything in my mind, "There I go again. There I am again." See, when I was a child, I was taught this. God said, I was told by the nuns in school, God said, "I am that I am." And I asked the priest in catechism class, "What does that mean, I am that I am?" I don't understand it. "I am that I am? What does that mean?" And the priest could never explain it to me to my satisfaction. Then when I finally had my conversation with God, I was told, "Oh, there was a comma that shouldn't be there. The comma is in the wrong place. The statement should be read, I am that. I am." So when I see a dog on the street, a beautiful flower, a homeless person leaning up against the wall, or something beautiful and wonderful, I simply say to myself quietly, "I am that. I am."
I love that. All right, so tell us a little bit more about the event that you're doing at EastWest Bookstore coming up.
I'm going to be there. I believe that I'm going to be giving a Friday night lecture. And
yes, on the 24th. Program. Yes, at 5 p.m. on the 24th. So you're going to be talking primarily about this book?
Yes, and anything else that the audience wants to discuss. I leave it wide open to them toward the middle of the program. But my first comments will be about these statements, true or false, and God's message to the world, "You've got me all wrong." And then we'll go from there and talk about what anyone in the room wants to talk about in terms of our lived reality and our expression and understanding of the divine. The next day, I'll be doing a whole one-day workshop there, and there we will help people to apply, that is, to overlay these ideas as a practical matter in their everyday life.
Okay, so actually showing me how to, take these beliefs that you have at the back of your book and say, well, if God isn't to be feared and God is love, then how would I apply that in my life?
Among other things, yes.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, no, but that's what I would expect out of the workshop that you'd have. Okay. Yeah. I have 5 more. I just got a reprieve from my engineer, and she said I have 5 more minutes, so can I ask you 5 more minutes of questions? I'm taking some questions that folks have on the internet. All right, so where does God come from? Who made God?
God did not come from anywhere, and nobody made God. God always was, is now, and always will be, forever and ever. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. So God is not something that didn't exist at one point and then was suddenly made.
Right.
But in fact always was, and always will be. It's difficult for the human mind to comprehend such a thing, but we need to stretch our mental abilities to expect that it might be possible that that's true. Yeah. I love Shakespeare on this. Shakespeare once said, I thought quite well, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy."
All right. So, what is God then?
You're
saying it's an energy.
I can answer that's a question that would take me 3 years to answer.
Okay.
But I can answer a different question. What is God not? Ask me, what is God not? And I'll give you a one-word answer. Nothing.
Okay, so my pen, my battery here, my cup, these are all God?
Everything in existence is a manifestation of the essential energy. If we are willing to call the essential energy God, then we notice that everything in existence is God, and there's nothing that is not God. It's not possible for there to be something that's not God. All of it is God. Okay,
so I'm looking at my pen. If I wanted to have a conversation with God, I could have a conversation with my pen, because this is a manifestation of God, if I understand your logic correct.
Well,
correct?
I think you're being reductionist about it. I think I think that the statement is a little bit has a little bit more nuance than that.
Okay.
We're suggesting in the book Conversations with God that the manifestations of divinity exist at varying levels of consciousness.
Okay.
The pen may not have the same level of consciousness as the dog. The dog may not have the same level of consciousness as the human. So what we notice is that the physicalizations of divinity are imbued with varying levels of what you and I would call consciousness or self-consciousness or self-awareness.
Right.
You
Right.
put a
Okay.
dog in front of a mirror, he'll bark at himself.
Right.
I generally don't bark at myself in the mirror, except unless it's 4:30 in the morning and I have to get up to catch a plane.
I bark at myself oftentimes, so. No, but I curse because, and the reason why I'm asking is not to be fictitious or to be controversial, but because I've studied shamanism, and shamanism would say yes, go into all of these entities and merge with it and see what you can learn, because every energy has something that you can learn from. There are archetypal energies and wisdom that dog would have over that maybe you need, frankly.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And that's true of the pen as well. I would put it probably somewhat differently. I would just say use the energy of divinity in whatever way it expresses itself for your own benefit.
Right, that's
so
true.
So we use the energy of a pen to write books like Conversations with God.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so another question is, all right, so the thing that kind of I was, what? When I read in your book, most of them like nodding my head, yes, I believe this. And then God does not want you to follow a life plan. But then you said God has a purpose for you. So what is our purpose here on earth then?
To reflect and to experience, to announce and to declare, to become and to fulfill the grandest version of the greatest vision ever we held about who we are and who God is. That is, life exists as an opportunity for divinity to express and experience itself. And it does so in the beauty of a rose, the majesty of the night sky, the power of a lion, the kindness of a human, and every other aspect of physicality that's made manifest in the universe at large. So our purpose is common to all of life. Life's purpose is to actively demonstrate divinity. And depending on the level of consciousness that a life force is imbued with, that demonstration can be increasingly sophisticated and increasingly and wonderfully complex and glorious, so that a human being, presumably, can demonstrate divinity somewhat more grandly than a boulder or a rock.
Right. But even in the boulder or the rock, right, if I think about a boulder rock, to me, what those represent is like strength, solidity, and then that's the divinity within that object that is actually being expressed.
What it lacks, what the boulder and the rock lacks probably, is a level of self-consciousness.
Yeah.
That is self-awareness that distinguishes certain aspects of divinity from certain other aspects. So I would suggest to you that while there is strength and all that other stuff inside of a rock,
right,
it probably does not have an awareness that such a thing is so. That is, and nor does a lion, for that matter.
Or most human beings on this planet.
See, mammals do not have the ability to self-reflect. A lion doesn't roar in the jungle and then sit down and say, gee, I wonder if I overdid it. Do you think I overdid it?
Right.
Because he doesn't have the ability to self-reflect.
Right.
Only humans on this planet, and perhaps mammals, certain mammals, dolphins and whales possibly, but a limited number of the mammalian life on this planet has the ability to reflect upon itself and to make a judgment about its own choices, actions, and decisions. When we make certain judgments at the highest level that we know is possible for us to embrace, we have demonstrated divinity. And that, I suggest, is the purpose of all of life. That's what every great spiritual teacher has invited us to, whether we're talking about Paramahansa Yogananda or Moses, whether we're talking about Muhammad or Christ, whether we're talking about Mother Teresa or Helen of Bingham, whatever spiritual teacher we're talking about, I need to tell you that they're all saying essentially the same thing.
So do you wake up, how do you motivate yourself and keep focus on what the true purpose of life is when you get up in the morning?
by realizing that my life has nothing to do with me, I asked God, how can I do that? God said, here's the answer, here's the secret. Listen carefully, Neale. Your life has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. If you think your life is about you, you're going to go through this next day trying to figure out how to make sure that you benefit, you win, you have what you need, etc., etc. You feel good, you feel happy, whatever. But if you are clear that your life is not about you, but it's about everyone else whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it, your whole raison d'etre, your whole reason for being, and the way you move through life will be remarkably different. It will produce, by the way, extraordinarily interesting results. That is, all the things that you were trying and stressing to obtain in the old way will come to you almost automatically. Somebody much more articulate and much more wisdom-filled than I will ever be once put it this way. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you.
What a perfect way to close the show. Thank you so much. We were talking to Neale Donald Walsch about his book, God's Message to the World. And make sure to come to the EastWest Bookstore on January 24th in Seattle to come watch him. Thank you so much for your wisdom and the 6 hours you spend every morning writing. You're a sage. It's beautiful.
It was lovely to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Goodbye for now.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.